And it's unfortunate that both Jehovah's Witnesses and many non-Jehovah's Witnesses alike tend to shy away from the original languages, but for different reasons. For Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not encouraged to challenge the accuracy of the New World Translation by looking at the original languages. In fact, they are discouraged from doing this. And so many Jehovah's Witnesses are left in placing their full trust in the New World Translation, which is a very dangerous thing to do.
You know, and the thing is, normally I wouldn't be so much up for something like this because I don't think it's really going to accomplish anything. My only contention was that when I watched the video, I got to a certain point of it, and I heard one statement, and I knew the statement was false, and that was when I made the contention. So the whole thing revolves just around that one statement. I have other things I'd be willing to talk about, but I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page with that statement, because I think on the blog, I don't think that we were connecting with the point that we were trying to make.
Right.
And what I believe that you said in the video, if I remember correctly, it's only been a few days, but you said that the Watchtower discourages us from checking the authenticity of the translation, of the New World Translation.
Right.
And whether or not we do independent research outside of what the Watchtower provides for us in a print form. So that basically, when you pointed me to the article, it mentioned the KM from, I think, 2008. Might have been September.
Yes.
And what it says, it talks about groups of individuals getting together on their own to either debate or to discuss scriptural, doctrine or whatever. And so I thought that there was a difference there, because they would start talking about groups, and then other people contend, well, what's wrong to getting together in a group? Now, the other thing that it said is it said that we do not endorse. So when they say that we are not endorsed, that's not like a hard, fast rule. You can do it. They just don't recommend it. And they would prefer that people would just go ahead, and other people might think that it's just blind devotion, but what it does is it creates unity, and people are willing to follow things that aren't necessarily a hard, fast rule, but just recommendations. It's not enforceable. It can't get you in any kind of trouble. But a lot of times when they find out about things like that, if they find out about it, they usually will talk to you about it and say, it's not really a good idea. It's not really recommended. You understand that. So.
Well, I guess.
Many times I've been counseled about things. I've been counseled about apostate literature. That was when I first got baptized. I accepted some apostate literature out on the street. Somebody reported me for it. So,
wait, so you were reading apostate literature?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess what I want to go back to is what I initially said in the video, which just to make it clear, to those viewing this, the comment you were disputing was something I had only said in passing. It wasn't the actual intent of the full video, which is okay. I stand by anything that I say in the video, but it was something that was only said in passing.
Well, yeah, but it still needs to be correct, though, doesn't it?
Well, no. That's what I'm saying. I stand by what I said, but if I remember what you said originally, if I'm representing it accurately, you said it was a complete lie.
Well, to me it is, because I mean I've been around it for 20 years and I've never had that experience. I have
So
not found that to be my experience at all.
right, but my whole point is that you're discouraged from doing that, from doing independent Bible research, whether it's in a group or on your own.
Well, I do it all the time. I do independent Bible research. Well, it depends on how you define that.
Exactly.
You know.
And that's why I kind of I resented your comment that it was a complete lie because it was something that was said in passing, which I couldn't really spend a whole lot of time defining exactly what I meant. I just kind of resent the comment that it was a complete lie.
Well, I still say that it is. I mean, I don't think you did it intentionally. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, but that doesn't, to me, that doesn't make it any less. I'm just calling it what it is.
Right.
With the way that I see it. But the only thing they were discouraging is from groups getting together independently, and then doing their own types of research. Aside from because we have a curriculum basically with the Watchtower. I mean, every week we have 5 meetings, different meetings a week, and each meeting has its own format. And so we have something that keeps us going throughout the entire week. So, there's a reason for that they say they don't endorse groups getting together and doing these kinds of debates and things, because it can be more counterproductive than it can be productive. We already have a format and a curriculum for learning and teaching. And I have found that when I refer to the Watchtower articles, aside from other things that I can find on the internet, that I usually get an answer a lot quicker. It's a lot easier. I mean, I have the CD-ROM. But I can also go out on the internet and I can check. I have to check all references. If they quote somebody out of one of their books from the 1600s or something like that, I have to go out on the internet and find it. And I have to check the quote to see whether or not it was taken out of context. So I don't know if you call that independent Bible research or not. I went outside of what the Watchtower said to verify their claims. Everything has to be checked, and each time I do that, I usually find that I'm satisfied with what I'm being told.
I guess what I would be questioning about this whole idea of independent research is, I guess, the possibility of what kind of conclusions that you can come to, because the way I would identify independent research is exactly what the Watchtower speaks against, which is independent thinking. So, can you understand the context in which I view that when I say independent Bible research as to analyze the accuracy of something the Watchtower teaches, whether it's the accuracy of the New World Translation or the accuracy of maybe the 607 chronology issue. When you're independently thinking, the conclusion could be A, what they're saying is true, or B, that what they're saying is false. But if you're not independently thinking, it's that you can verify the claims and to see if it checks out. So the conclusion's already been made, but you're just checking it to make sure that it's true. That wouldn't be my definition of independent thinking.
You can't. That would I would be a fool to come to a conclusion before I've heard the matter. There's a proverb,
Right.
So I can't draw a conclusion until I've checked it first, because somebody could come to me at my door and say, I'm a Mormon and this is what the Bible says, and if it's something I haven't heard before, I can't take his word for it because I think that it sounds right. I have to know. I have to know why and how and what evidence there is. There has to be. there's usually some kind of evidence somewhere that can help us to draw, an accurate conclusion. But I think that it's not really that difficult. I think that the way people put things, and they tend to obscure, what people need to know, and then they tell them what they want them to know. So you really have to filter out a lot of the BS that people get to you, because you do get, when you talk to people, you do get a lot of different ideas that are bogus. A lot of people, ideas have been drawn just from life experience and from what they learned out of the Bible.
Yeah, yeah, but I just want to really make sure that I'm clear on what you're saying and how you're viewing this whole issue. So, give me an example of let's just use the New World Translation, because I think you had initially brought that up. Well, actually, I think I brought it up since I brought up the article, but I guess we're both on the same page as using that as a good example. So the question box for the Kingdom Ministry, which I'm showing up to the video camera right now, I have the actual article, and I did attend the meeting when that article was discussed, so I did listen in to a lot of the answers. That was a couple of years ago, obviously, so I can't remember everything. But when it's discouraging a group study of analyzing the accuracy of the New World Translation, whether it's in a group or an individual study to analyze the accuracy, how would you go? So if you were going to analyze the accuracy of the New World Translation, how would you go about doing that?
Well, first of all, I would check it with other translations. I would look at the King James Version. I would look at whatever. Usually there's going to be a Watchtower article that's going to detail that for me. It's going to say, these are what the different versions say. Or, if I have several different versions, I can go look at that. I also have a Strong's Concordance and a Vine's Expository Dictionary, as well as a Greek Interlinear and Emphatic Diaglot. So I can go out to the Greek manuscripts. I don't have anything in Hebrew, but I do have a Hebrew dictionary. So I just had to have somebody to point me to which word that is. And usually there's going to be a whole article somewhere in a Watchtower that's going to explain whichever subject that you're concerned about. And so I can go and I can look in the Greek dictionary and find out that the same Greek word has different shades of meaning. Just about any Greek word does. It's not always used in the same way. So when you have English words, they don't necessarily mean the way we think of it in English. We have to go to the Greek and the Hebrew to find out what the original writer was, the way in which he was using it. So you have to look at the context, obviously, of what you're reading. It helps to know the background of the writer and what his life experience was like. And so you get kind of a better idea of his personality, like Peter's personality, for instance, Paul's personality. And that helps us to shed a little bit of light on the subject, that whatever they're talking about, and to put us within the context of the subject, because that's always important. So those original languages are gonna give the greatest light to the meaning of the original writer behind what his original thought was.
Well, I appreciate
so
that.
That's basically what I would do.
How would you separate that? And I appreciate that explanation. And how would you separate that from what the Watchtower calls independent thinking? How is what you described different from that?
Well, independent thinking, I can do any kind of thinking that I want, but what changes is when I go out and I teach somebody something that's contrary to what the Watchtower teaches, or I publish it, something contrary. That would be a form of independent thinking. Now, I can think anything I want, and I have to draw out. The Bible doesn't tell us everything. It tells us what we need to know in order to serve God successfully. approval, but it doesn't tell us everything. You know, we're naturally curious, and we want to know as much as we can, you know, of what we deem to be important. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Well, yeah, it definitely does, and without getting into a whole slew of quotations, it would turn into probably a really long conversation, and I also don't want to put you on the spot with with talking about quotations that you don't necessarily have in front of you to really check the context and everything. But I'm sure you could very well imagine there's a lot of Watchtower statements that really put what you said into question, that goes beyond just what you should or shouldn't say in public as far as publishing something or spreading your ideas into the congregation, because there's even some extent to which I would agree with that, in my congregation. That's, if I wanted to go in, just start causing disruption, spreading ideas just to cause commotion. I mean, there's even a line there that most evangelical Protestants would not want to cross. But there's a lot that the Watchtower says that really puts a lot of what you say into question, and that mainly has to do with...
No, in your mind. Remember that. You're talking about in your mind.
Well, yeah, so, of course.
The other thing I was thinking earlier, too, is when I say something that you could deem as a conclusion, there had to be something that led me to a conclusion, and people have all sorts of conclusions that are not correct. So you have to go back and to see why the person's coming to that, what evidence that they have to back up to support what they say. So basically, even by you saying, well, that brings into a lot of question, well, that's kind of like a conclusion. That's a conclusion that you came to. That doesn't mean that everybody is going to feel that way. Just because you concluded that, but now if you have evidence, of some sort, to verify what you're saying, then fine,
Right. Let me just bring up an example that is sort of vague, but it still would be an example. What if the Watchtower publishes something that you think is not true?
Well, I don't know that I've actually run across that.
So you're saying that everything since your involvement, you've never come across something they've ever said that's turned out to be false?
Well, the only thing that I know of is, there are some things probably, but I don't know that I knew it at the time. But there are things, there are things about the blood issues that changed. We know that certain things do change, and they don't have everything perfect. If they didn't have it perfect 20 years ago, it's probably not 100% perfect today. And that's why, they're not infallible. They're just humans. They make mistakes, and it takes time for people, even as a whole. I mean, just to learn things, And but no, I don't run across that. I find that what they print, they don't print things without some sort of way of verifying it. They can't just throw thoughts in out there like a lot of people do in their videos without backing it up. And so everything that's in print has a way to check it and verify it. But you were saying that I've already drawn a conclusion, but no. But over a period of time, you get to have a trust. It's just like in a marriage. After a while, you can trust your wife without questioning everything that she's doing. And because she has a history of being consistent. So you begin to build this trust, and you don't have to question every little thing. But what gets me sometimes is people make such a big deal about what the Watchtower writes. If you read what's in the Watchtower, this is all about the Bible. To me, we have a book now that's called Bearing Thorough Witness About God's Kingdom. And this is a book that we use it to what they now call Bible study. It used to be called book study. Now it's called Bible study. And they combined a couple of the meetings together so we don't have to go 3 times a week. We can go 2 times. So they took one of the days away and then moved part of it onto the other day and condensed some of the time. But in this book, when you go through it, everything that's in it is from the Bible. It goes through kind of a detailed accounts from the beginning of the Christian congregation all the way up until our day. But it focuses, the book is, probably about a couple hundred pages, and it goes through, most of what it goes through is, obviously the Gospels and Paul and their preaching, Paul and Barnabas preaching, and what was going on with the congregation at that time. But all of it is about the Bible. It's extracting things directly out of it and putting it into a book. So that's not, to me, that doesn't even really have a lot of their own ideas in there. I mean, obviously, it's going to make some comments about, how this applies, but you have to do that. You can't just give somebody a Bible and just say, here, read it and understand it. You have to give them direction.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like people that refuse to go to college.
Right.
Like it's a waste of time. But is it? It might be for some people, but for most people, I think they would, if they can do it, then that's obviously, not something that's going to hurt you. And you go to college and people tell you things, you don't have to believe everything you hear.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't mind, let me just use an example of something that would be something that you could view as false. Let's say you lived since you brought up the blood example, that would be a good one. Let's say you lived during the time when organ transplants were thought of as cannibalistic, and so there's a possibility that some may have jeopardized their health or lost their lives because they refused the organ transplant because they thought the Watchtower's reasoning on that was good reasoning. So what if you were living in that time and you thought that was actually false, that accepting an organ transplant should be up to every Christian's conscience? So how would that actually play out in the mind of a Jehovah's Witness if you did come to firmly believe something was false before the organization came to put it in print?
Okay, well, it's kind of theoretical in a way, but that's okay. My answer would be, because I've lived the blood issue for 10 years because I'm anemic right now. I've been anemic for 10 years. I haven't had a blood transfusion. But 10 years ago, my kidneys failed, and my blood count went down to 4.2. And that's near death. And I didn't take the blood, but I had to do that based on what I believed. I couldn't, we've had studies that we've gone over the blood issue specifically in some of our group studies. And so I knew, several things about it, and I had a brochure that I read when I was in the hospital, basically dying. And except that I didn't believe it. I had to refuse the blood because of what I believed. I couldn't totally depend on just because it was church doctrine. But that's up to me. Now, if another person thought it was false, I can't say what they would do. Everybody has to make their own choice. You live and die by your own decisions. If you make good, judgmental decisions, then things generally are going to come out good. You reap what you sow. So people have to live by their own decisions, and it's up to me to decide, really, what I'm going to allow. And the thing about it is I think that the doctors should have respected me a little bit more for me not wanting the blood. Because, they kept thinking in their minds, he doesn't want blood because his church tells him not to take it. Well, that's not true. I didn't take blood because of what I believe, of what I've learned in the Bible, in Leviticus and Acts, for instance. And whether or not that prohibition on blood applies to a transfusion. Prohibition on alcohol doesn't mean that you can ingest it in other ways besides drinking it. Doesn't mean you can shoot it in your veins. So.
But as a hypothetical though, which I'm it's hard for me to ask you when was a time when you thought it was something was false, because you can't really give an example, and that's okay. I'm not expecting you to, but maybe just as a hypothetical, like if a rank and file non-elder, just Jehovah's Witness, came to believe firmly that it should be in every Christian's conscience whether he wants to accept a organ transplant, what would be the appropriate action for him to take in that circumstance? That would be A. And B, what would happen to him if he did make a firm stand on that and declared that that is actually unbiblical to be forbidding organ transplants?
Well, let's say, let me give you a hypothetical just so I can, sort of the way that you word it is, I don't know if I'm not getting it quite like I want it, but let's suppose a person, an elder, went out and took a transfusion, and then it was reported, or maybe he even mentioned it, and he told the other elders, well, I have to do what I got to do. Well, let's suppose they gave their child one and said, I got to do what I have to do to my child. When if it's a serious offense, you go into a judicial committee, and when you meet before the three elders, what they do is they examine the matter and find out what's going on and how you feel about it, and what's behind it. And people are not always disciplined in the same way. If there's even discipline needed. So there's not like a hard, fast, oh, you did this wrong, here's the penalty. Actually, many times I have been, I've been disfellowshipped before, by the way. That was in 1995.
Okay, a while ago.
So that there right tells you that I'm not actually perfect by their standards, or even close. But that shows that I went through a period where I had problems, and I took a little bit of time to sort of overcome some of those things. And it did, but actually, when they did disfellowship me, that was the thing that helped me the most, because I immediately stopped what I was doing, and I started going back to the meetings. And what I was doing was just like, drinking excessively, and whatever else. Usually, people that drink end up being stupid, But that was, how that went. So, but all I'm really saying is that when they meet with you, they try to find out what's going on in your head and decide whether or not, you really understand that, whether or not if this is a Bible commandment or not. You can't be disciplined on something unless there's either a commandment or there's a principle behind it. Yeah, whatever it is that you're doing.
So in the case of, if it was the organ transplant issue, and there's a whole number of issues you could maybe, you could name depending on how far back in the history you want to go. You could be thinking that the current understanding of the this generation is not correct, and the last, change that was made was actually correct. So whatever. So that's
actually a good one, because the thing about the generation, obviously that's changed many times, and I think the last time was in 2010.
Right.
And that, people, you're talking about dates. We don't serve Jehovah for a date. So whether or not that date ever, like 1975, for instance, I don't see that as really being a problem, because I've been a witness for 20 years. I mean, I always thought it was coming within a year or two. 20 years ago, I thought that. I was certain that it would. But, when it didn't, we understand that we're only human, and we're not really not supposed to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be unexpected. You know, we're not supposed to know exactly, you know, when it's going to happen. But I don't have a problem with making those types of adjustments. I would rather they made those adjustments rather than just to try to stand by something that, you know, is not supported by the current evidence.
Well, but what makes me kind of question all of that is that if you wanted to take a stand for that and say, you know what, I really think that this is incorrect, this current understanding, and you wanted to respectfully show others that understanding because you want to follow the truth and you want others to follow the truth as well. So why would that, or would that not be, I guess, I don't want to say allowed because obviously you can do whatever you want, but why would that not be encouraged?
Well, if you don't believe Watchtower doctrine in its entirety, then you shouldn't be a witness.
Well, yeah, but I'm
become a member. You shouldn't be a member. And
Right.
if you're not a member of the church, then it really doesn't make any difference what you do.
Right.
But for me, being a member of the church, if I don't, and if all of a sudden I didn't believe that, let's say all of a sudden I thought Jesus was God for some reason. If I did, I would quit. I would quit being a witness. You know, in a minute.
Right.
It takes a lot of time to be a witness. It takes a lot of effort. It's not always that easy. You have to give it your all. Otherwise, it doesn't work out very well for you. And that was why when, you know, most of the time, you know, in the past, when I was younger, you know, I had a little more energy. I could put everything I had into it. I could spend basically all day and all week with it. You know, I was able to do that. So, and that was the way it works for me. You know, and then you're going to get results depending on what you put into it. But if for some reason I didn't believe something, then why would I want to go to the meetings and follow? Unless maybe you were like a family member, but you know what I mean.
Well, I'm actually more speaking not of the core doctrines because that's pretty obvious that you would be out the door in a second if you stop believing one of the core doctrines. I'm more speaking of something that wouldn't be quite as core, but maybe important, I would say.
Okay, well, all right. Well, then what you would do is you can believe whatever you want,
Right.
but that doesn't mean you're going to publish it or teach it. There's no reason to do that. That's basically, you know, that's not something. There's a whole thing that goes through the Bible about the way the congregation operated, and what the witnesses will tell you is that their organizational structure is structured much like what they have found to be in the Bible as an outline. One of them would be the elder ministerial servant arrangement. It's found in 1 Timothy and Titus. It gives qualifications for those who are overseers, or shepherds in the congregation, and these are the ones who basically are in charge, watching over your soul, as it says, but for your own benefit. You know, because they're usually older and wiser and been around a little bit longer. You know, they're not newly baptized people. And they usually have more experience, and they can usually help people on a whole a lot better than we all can individually, because somebody has to be in charge. You know, we're not just individuals, because otherwise we'd have no unity. You know, there's a lot to be said about what would it be like if the first century Christians were not united in what they were doing. They had no continuity. They had nothing to. I mean, even Muslims have things that, and Mormons have things that they follow. Mormons don't drink coffee. I mean, that's not. You're never going to find that in the Bible.
Right.
That's probably something in the Book of Mormon, I would assume.
Yeah.
But you know, it is something that people will follow certain things, although there's no hard fast rule to follow it. You know, but I hope that answers my question. If you don't believe something, then why stick around?
Well, but I'm still talking about something that well, I'm using the organ issue because whenever they changed from not accepting organ transplants to accepting organ transplants, that didn't change the religion into a different religion. That just refined a particular element of it. And there's been many other changes, and maybe some much larger changes in the past, especially in the earlier years. So, but for that particular issue, why would you bring it up? Well, it's something that put people's lives in jeopardy, right? So, I mean, I would say that would be a very important issue, and even when it gets to the blood.
Why do that if it puts people's lives in jeopardy? That's kind of that's very subjective to put it like that.
Well, the reason I'm putting it like that is because
you would put your life in jeopardy if it meant being loyal to your Creator, right? Wouldn't you? You would put your life in jeopardy if it meant being loyal.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's kind of how that works.
But this, I would say, this is significantly different because people were refusing to take organ transplants because A, their leaders said so, and B, they found the reasoning of their leaders sound.
Okay, here's the one thing about that, and also the thing about the blood. If I would have taken a blood transfusion in 2001, it would have helped me to feel better, but it wouldn't have fixed the fact that my kidneys were not working. Now, that was just my own particular, for instance, the greatest example that you could probably use for that is if somebody was shot and then you lose blood, like 5 pints of blood within 10 minutes, and then if you don't get a transfusion, your body goes into shock and you die.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit different than what I was doing. Had the problem that I had, but if we're going to die anyway. I mean, if people can get a resurrection now. If you say, well, I need to prolong my life, you really don't know by taking a transfusion that you're going to prolong your life. You don't know that for sure. They would hope that that's what it would do, but not necessarily. I could have taken a transfusion and then died from the transfusion, and let's suppose I didn't take the transfusion, and now I'm still alive 10 years later. You see what I mean? I could have easily died by taking the blood transfusion. Because people do. I mean, it happens.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So, we don't know. We don't know that that's what caused their death.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that whether it's a transfusion or the organ transplant issue, well, I would, because we're going to disagree on the blood transfusion issue, obviously, but we both agree on the organ transplant issue. That should be up to every Christian's conscience and using their own reasoning as to whether they want to accept that or not.
Well, we know that now.
Well,
we apparently they didn't know that then.
Yeah, but what if? Okay, so
you can't expect them to know everything.
Well, no, I'm not saying you expect them to know everything. That's not my point. My point would be, if you made the stand and tried to convince others that, look, this is up to your own individual conscience, and here is my reasoning for it. Now, if you do that, wouldn't you be subject to some type of disciplining? And you can answer that in a second. But if the leaders do that and they make their declaration that, okay, we decided that it's okay to do this, and all Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide agreed with them. So I guess the difference is the one making the change. The rank and file can't make that change, but the leaders can. And then when the leaders make that change, all of the rank and file agree with it. So is that a correct characterization of how that works?
I guess to some degree, probably.
And so that would be my point.
I don't have a problem. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because I mean, even then, some of the things that you bring up that you say, well, you say I have a problem with that. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. The fact that because we assigned them basically to do that, or they've been assigned to do those types. Somebody has to do it. You know, and that those somebodies are never going to be perfect.
Yeah,
So
and
I
there's
have to decide. I still have to make my own decision. Now, if it would have been 20 years ago, and I had to decide to take an organ or not, and the church said, "Don't do it," or you shouldn't do it. And then I still have to decide. But I understand what you're saying, but that's just kind of, I guess, it just goes with the territory,
in one
the way that it is. I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Yeah,
myself.
and let me raise one quote, and I'm not putting you on the spot because this is something that you would have to just, and everyone watching this would have to look up the context and everything. But this is from the 1957 Watchtower, May 1st, on page 284, paragraph 14. Basically, what this is saying, I'll just give my paraphrase and then I'll read it. Basically, what it's saying is that if something comes up that you don't agree with, you should believe it anyway, and you should wait on Jehovah to make the appropriate steps, whether that's convincing the leaders of the truth or something else. But regardless,
well, now when you say you should believe it anyway, now that part I'm not sure about that. That's what I would have to check.
well, yeah. So let me just
Now, when you
read.
say wait on Jehovah, now I've definitely heard that before.
Well, because that's in
But
the
when you say that you
quote.
should believe it anyway, I don't know that I'm not down with that necessarily. I would have to check that article. So if you want, you said it's in which one?
Yeah, it's in the 1957.
67?
57.
57.
Yeah, 57.
Right.
May 1st. On page 284.
284.
Oh, you're looking it up now? Okay. That's actually good because we could discuss it.
Now, which paragraph is it?
It's paragraph 14.
All right, let me just kind of read it real quick. This is
Sure.
relying on Jehovah's directive power. Showing respect for Jehovah's organization really resolves itself down to our attitude toward God's visible channel and the trust that we place in our proved faithful brothers. If we have become thoroughly convinced that this is Jehovah's organization, that he is guiding and directing his people, and we shall not be unsettled by anything that happens. If something comes up and we do not understand, we will wait patiently till it is made thoroughly clear to us. If we feel sure something is wrong, we will keep the commandment of our Father and take whatever theocratic steps are open to us, and then wait on Jehovah. We will not forsake our mother's teaching by immediately beginning to criticize and find fault. We will realize that Jehovah knows what is going on in this organization, and if he is willing to permit it, who are we to insist it should be different? If we really have faith, we will know that if it is wrong, he will straighten it out eventually, and we will be far safer inside his organization, even if these minor difficulties, than we would be on the outside where only chaos and destruction await us. I don't know that I read in that it says we should believe it anyway. That part, I didn't see that part. Now, when it said wait on Jehovah, now I see that in there. I don't see anything where it says in that paragraph, you should believe it anyway.
So if
It
something
just says to wait for an answer is what it says.
So if something comes up, like for example the organ issue, and you become convinced that it is within every Christian's individual conscience, whether they should accept that or not, are you saying that you can, in your heart, just fully and completely disagree with the organization and stand firm in that disagreement? Is that what? Because that's why I'm bringing up these hypotheticals, because I think those are very real, and I think that's something
Well,
that.
I still kind of go back to the thing where I think whatever I want, but what I say and tell other people or publish to the public is different. It wouldn't be up for me to go against church teaching publicly. I would have to wait. What I would do is I would basically just keep it to myself. I can believe whatever I want, but I would keep those types of things to myself, and then I would wait to see how the issue becomes resolved within the congregation.
Yeah. Well, can you believe it's already been 45 minutes?
Yeah, I do actually.
which I'm kind of, I was only wanting to go just because this is a video.
It's better because we didn't know ahead of time which direction we were going.
I know, but I think we covered some pretty good ground. I think it'll be beneficial. But yeah, it went a little over than what I kind of wanted to go, maybe 15 to 30. But that's quite all right. I think it was a good discussion.
Yeah, like you said, what other people can do is they can listen to it, and then they can decide, and then they can make their own comments about what they thought about what was said.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I'm just wanting to be consistent. You know.
Right.
Look, I've given talks at the Kingdom Hall before, and I guarantee you that I've said things that were incorrect. Because it was pointed out to me later, and then when I checked it, I'm like, oh man, can you believe I said that? You know? So when somebody's giving a talk at the Kingdom Hall, it's not, these are just brothers, These are just people. They're sinners, Everybody's a sinner. So, people are not 100% perfect, and, so when somebody, and the Watchtower's not that way either, they're not perfect, so you still have to, but it is said there that, in that article there, that eventually we might come to the conclusion that, look, I don't know that I agree with this. But it says, to have a waiting attitude. Eventually the congregation may correct it. But, as you were saying, that becomes a bigger issue with people's lives are put at stake. But, we live in a tough world, People are dying all the time. So, it's not like people, it's like intentional murder,
Right.
All they are trying to do is to get Joe's direction and then to pass it on. So the question becomes whether we recognize that as Jehovah's channel of communication.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, that's where a lot of people come to having a problem with it. Is this really a communication channel from Jehovah to the congregation?
Mm-hmm. Well,
obviously, I believe that it is. Otherwise I wouldn't be around very long.